The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show and Football Show here on OurGame with myself, Shane Stapleton, Fintan O'Toole there in the middle, and former Tipperary and Waterford hurler Andy Moloney as well. How are you doing, man?
Good, Shane. How are you?
I'm good now. Like we've so much to cover here between the Tipperary final replay, obviously Loughmore and Thurles-Loughmore a couple of weeks ago. Ballyea against Ballygunner is going to be very exciting. Obviously, Andy, you were over the Ballygunner minors last year and obviously played with Ballygunner as well. But Fintan, we'll start off with your own county, Cork, and Davy Fitz. He's been linked with the vacant Camogie job. Now, Matthew Toomey is the name we're seeing as coming in as the manager and taking over from four-time All-Ireland winning manager Paddy Murray. But then Davy Fitz would be on the ticket too. It's quite an interesting development.
It certainly is. It's kind of was doing the rounds, I suppose, the last few days. It started to kind of intensify in terms of Davy. Now, it was never really a situation that he was going to be coming in as manager. The talk was from a while, the moment Paddy Murray kind of stepped down at the end of October. He'd been there for so long, since 2012, that Matthew Toomey, who would have worked under him for a good few years, and will be just very familiar kind of with a lot of the current players and with the setup that he was kind of basically in line. The front runner to take over as manager, but then the presence of Davy is probably what's caught a lot of people's attention, potentially as a coach. And my understanding was that there was talks that there was going to be a county board meeting last night in Camogie, and there was going to be some developments and potentially a players meeting as well, in terms of that they would have been informed about the makeup of the new management team, but that was postponed. So it seems like nothing has kind of got over the line yet, and nothing is decided, but definitely it would be a pretty interesting departure for him. Interestingly, he did an interview last month on Red FM, and actually watched back the clip this morning with Valerie Wheeler, and she just threw it out there because it was the week that Paddy Murray had stepped down, and he kind of started laughing, and he said, I'd never really learned anything, was the way he put it. And obviously, I suppose, since he stepped down as Wexford, the big talk about where he was going to go next, obviously, was potentially the Galway manager job. So this will be a bit of a new departure, but probably in keeping with, we've seen it with ladies football. Mick Bohan worked with the Dublin footballers, the Clare footballers, then took over the Dublin ladies side. Davy Fitzgerald has taken over as Waterford manager. He was with Cork. There's been a bit of kind of crossover. I suppose you look at in Hurling and Camogie, then let's say Conor Phelan is probably one of the big examples, isn't he? He was involved in Kilkenny Camogie set up with Anne Downey when they won in 2016, and now he's obviously with Brian Cody. So there has been that kind of moving between the codes over the last couple of years. So speculation continues, but there's definitely, it still hasn't got over the line anyway at the moment.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, Davy Fitz has been around the blocks at this stage, obviously over Waterford, Clare, Wexford, and won pretty much everywhere that he's been. He's won something. What are your thoughts on this? Because I suppose once the Galway thing happened, it ended up the game of musical chairs. There was nowhere else left to sit down at that stage. So would you see this as a shock, or do you think there's some sort of logic to it?
I suppose when I read it there this morning, to be honest, Shane, I thought it was a bit of a strange move from him. I suppose he'd given, 5 years at Wexford. He'd given a year or two at Waterford as well. And as he mentioned there, everyone thought he was going for the Galway job, and Henry got it. So I suppose, he'd even said himself previously that he was happy just to kind of enjoy a little bit of downtime now and what have you. So it was a little bit like Brian McFadden leaving Westlife. when he said he wanted downtime, he ended up going out solo himself. So this going to Cork is a big move big move for Camogie, and it's great for the profile of Camogie as well to have a person like Davy Fitz to win and coach a team. Because as you mentioned there, he's been very successful with any of the teams that he's been with. So I'm sure Cork will be no different.
Yeah, you've been involved in different management teams as well. Does it? If you're someone who's used to being a manager, is there something to do with the ego about then going back and being coach and not being the number one? And I suppose one that comes to mind is someone you've worked with, Colin Bonner, of course, with Ballyea Shamrocks. The fact that obviously he doesn't have a massive ego from what I can tell. He's in with Dixborough under Pádraig Fanning this year, and then just came out as tip manager, and obviously he's been leading teams over the years. But just that whole point in terms of like, is there sometimes ego issues in terms of you're used to being number one and then you're number two?
I think it depends on the personality, like I wouldn't know Davy myself, but like, he seems to be a very strong personality, and he seems to be a person, that likes to be in charge. But at the same time, I'd say, this is probably a new departure for him. It's a bit of a release too, not to be always up front, I suppose, dealing with the media side of it. And it would probably mean for him that he can deal with the players a little bit more one-to-one, and try and, I suppose, get the best out of his players. And for them, I think, for the players not to see him as a manager, because sometimes there's a line there with the manager and the players, and sometimes they feel they can't approach the manager as, I suppose, as easy as they would the coach. So this will probably be a new departure for Davy. We might see a softer side to Davy going forward. The fact that he's in the coaching side of it. But you mentioned Colin Bonner there. Like, I know Colin a long time, and there's definitely no ego there. Colin was, when we went into first year with Ballyea, even Colin was coaching the team, I was managing it, and then we swapped roles a year or two later. You know what I mean? And there was no problem that way. So like, Colin would tip at the moment. You can see what he's trying to do already with the Miller Shield and things like that. He's trying to bring back, I suppose, some old traditions and try and find players from a couple of the intermediate and junior clubs as well that will strengthen the whole setup. So, look, it all depends on the person involved, Shane, to be honest. And I think, look, this move, as I said earlier, I think it's going to be a big move for Camogie in general, because, we've seen Cahill Murray being involved in Galway. And he's brought in Donal O'Rourke, who was manager of the Waterford Camogie team previously, you know what I mean? So he brought him in last year as coaching, and Donal done very well on the coaching side with the won the All-Ireland, So it can work. It all depends. Make sure it's the relationship between the manager and the coach. That's the big one.
And what are your thoughts on Colin Bonner getting the tip management job, and how do you think he'll do?
I think Colin is an honest hurling man. I think he'll do very well. I think he's good men with him as well. He's picked one from each division, which, it augurs well really for Tip, because, look, you can't, what I mean? I suppose Tip, it's a big county. It's, and like, you've obviously a lot of good hurlers. North Mid will be traditionally the strong divisions. And then you have, the West and the South. So, obviously when we were growing up, Shane, the West produced 7 or 8 players for the county team. They were the strong division at the time, and they were starting, Cahill and Clonakilty were winning county finals and what have you. So it's it's after switching around a little bit now again, but I think Colin will be good for Tipperary. I think he's a breath of fresh air as well, you know what I mean? And he'll breathe a new lease of life into some of the older players. But I think it's important as well to know that he's interested in bringing on these younger players as well,
Yeah, we can't also mention the fact that you were involved in that management team with Shamrocks. You won an All-Ireland. You've obviously had Henry Shefflin in a dressing room. That was as a player. Now he's over Galway. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I was talking to Henry actually there last week or the week before when he got the job, and I suppose he asked me what did I think, and he asked me was I bad, and I think the last time he asked me that question was when he took over the Ballyea team, because sometimes it's hard to manage your own club team, you know what I mean? Especially with players that you've grown up with and played with for the previous years. And I told him at that stage he was bad. And he went out and won 2 All-Ireland clubs. So I didn't even offer an opinion to him on the Galway setup. Yeah, look, it's a good move for Henry in terms of, I suppose, his managerial, progression. At the moment, there isn't a vacancy in the Kilkenny setup. In terms of being a manager, and I think that's where Henry wants to go down. He wants to go down that line. And, look, one thing I will say about Henry, in everything he does, he gives it everything. You know what I mean? So whether it is a player with Kilkenny, a player with Ballyea, or a manager of Ballyea, he will give it 100%. And Galway can be guaranteed of that. So as I suppose it really augurs well for the championship next year, because you're going to have, it'll be interesting to see how Tipperary progress under Colin Bonner, Waterford under Liam Cahill. You'll have Galway now under Henry, and obviously John Kiley with Limerick, so it's a good championship.
Yeah. Fintan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I think it's going to be probably kind of the most fascinating storyline, isn't it? Looking ahead towards the next year's championship. And obviously, I suppose it's interesting what Andy's saying there about in terms of when he took over the club, one in a way that everyone's kind of talking about, the profile of the Galway job, but maybe is the pressure off slightly, like, you know, because he's kind of proven himself already with the club, and maybe that would have been probably a bit more difficult one in terms of kind of prior relationships and all that. But just the other thing that strikes me, he seems to have recruited well in terms of the backroom team, you know, like Kevin Lally seems very, very highly rated. Obviously, he's not involved in St. Thomas's this year, but you see what they're going on doing. They're going for 4 in a row now, and he had such success with them before. And then obviously Damien Joyce, I think Andy might be familiar with this. I think he was in WIT, was he, with Henry? So there's kind of a prior link there, like, and you know, he's been up at the county semi-finals, so he definitely hasn't kind of wasted any time and kind of getting everything sorted and going. And you know, imagine if you're a Galway player, there's got to be a lot of enthusiasm, you know, after, you know, kind of disappointing summer, going out in the middle of the qualifiers, to be kind of looking ahead now. So I'd say it's all guns blazing for 2022.
I think as well, Shane, it was important for Henry to get Kevin Lally and Damien Joyce, local people that are well got in the county as well. I know Damien from our time in college as well in WIT, and he'd have known Henry very well, you know, so, and he's well gotten in Galway circles. So, yeah, I think that's a good move for Henry to get those people on board.
And just another question then, both for Colin Bonner and I suppose with Henry Shefflin, what type of hurling do you expect their teams to play? So do you, like with Tipperary, is there going to be, you know, just driving the ball along and let the ball do the work type thing? Is it going to be more of a hybrid version of maybe what the likes of Limerick are trying to do? And the same question about Galway.
Is that for me, Shane? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that's you, Andy.
Yeah. Well, I would say Colin will do a kind of he'll want both types of games going. You know, he, like, obviously there's times in the game when you have to hit the ball long and you have to depend on the opposition to, your own players to actually put up their hand and grab that ball. So to be able to win their own ball is a big thing with Colin as well, you know, to fight for it. But, you know, I think, you know, he'll also introduce, you know, that game that Limerick have kind of, I suppose, really done so well at the short game as well. So it's a mixture of both, you know. You can't go really one game plan over another. I think you have to be able to play both because you're met with both scenarios during the game anyway. And, you know, I think Colin has plenty of experience as, you know, we mentioned Ballyea, but also with Carlo. He did very well with Carlo as well. And, you know, he has plenty of experience coming in there now that he knows exactly what he wants, the type of game plan he wants. And I just expect players, you know, in any of the teams that Colin has been involved with, the players have really rallied behind him because he's that kind of a person, you know what I mean? He gets players on board and on side, and you know, they play for him, but they also play for Jersey. And, like, you know, you couldn't meet a bigger Tipperary man than Colin Bonner because he's just Tipperary to the core, you know. He's even trying to convert his own young fella. I remember when he was only a small little fella, he was trying to convert him to Tipperary. He didn't succeed, but, you know, that's just tell you about Colin. Is just the Bonners are just entrenched in Tipperary hurling, and you know, Colin just loves that jersey, but he'll hopefully bring that passion to the Tipperary jersey as well.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, Colin Bonner lives down in Waterford, so I think his young lad might be playing with Dunhill. Is it? Do I have that right?
He is. He got a red card on the last outing, so
he's a Bonner, all right. A couple of comments coming in here. TV Street. My favourite Shefflin moment from this year's championship is when he wrote off Limerick at halftime, saying Tip would win it easy. Elbow cough. Porter, the storyline for next year's championship for Tip will be the Waterford game. Sharpen the hurls, boys. I'd say you'll be getting some amount of interview requests that week, Andy. But like that, the excuses will kind of end at that stage. You know, everyone will be saying give Colin Bonner a chance. But when it comes to Tipperary against Waterford, patience over.
Yeah, I'd say Colin will be getting a bit of stick himself because he's living down here. But yeah, sure. Look, it's championship, isn't it? And that's what ultimately that's what everyone is judged on. So, like, no matter how well or how poor you're doing in the league, people want to see you performing at championship level. And I think, to be fair, Colin will probably use the league as a chance to get to know all these players, to try and see if there's a few more players on earth, a few more of them in the county, and then come championship, it's, as you said, all bets are off really, you know, and it'll be game on. And it's a tough, like, you know, Waterford is a tough ask at the best of times, and I think Limerick found that out last year in the league stages. You know, it was a tough physical game, and Waterford came out on top. You know, so yeah. Look, Colin knows what's ahead of him. He knows exactly what's ahead of him. That he's coming into a bit of a cauldron down in Welsh Park, and you know, to get a result there would be a big thing for him. Yeah.
And Colin Bonner will certainly be at the Tipperary County Final replay this week, Finton. So it was 217 to 23 points when they met a few weeks ago. Loughmore-Castleiney were 8 points down after 17 minutes. They turned the game around. John McGrath did what he, is seeming to do every week. Obviously, he was the hero in the county football final last week. Man of the match 6 weeks in a row. What are you looking at in terms of like storylines or, tactical points ahead of this replay?
I suppose the two things that jump out to me are both kind of related to the football final last week, Shane. That first off, from the Loughmore point of view, the fact that Brian McGrath and John Maher didn't start. Obviously, we know Brian McGrath has been struggling with a tummy injury over the last while. Then he came on as a sub. John Maher, as far as I know, didn't feature at all. So what's their availability like for Sunday? Are they going to start? Can they only start one of them? Are they in a position to come on? Because if you think about Loughmore, when they last got to the final against Thurles-Loughmore in 2014, obviously John Maher would have been playing then, but I think the addition of Brian McGrath has been a huge thing in terms of two really, really strong players and giving them a platform in defence. Obviously, they got back to the final this year. They got to it last year. And I suppose all the talk last year was obviously about Kildangan's display. I thought John Maher, the manner in which Kildangan won and the kind of drama with extra time, like John Maher gave an absolutely incredible performance in that game, and he's been so key for them as well in this year's championship. So that's one of the aspects of it. And then the other one, I just wonder, is the pressure off a slight little bit with Loughmore now? Is there a bit of freedom? Because at least they have one piece of silverware in the bag. They're going into this game now, having lost last year's two finals and lost the Hurling a couple of weeks ago. I mean, like, they're lauded all over the country, and it's very, very admirable what they're doing, and there's no shortage of that. But I suspect that that's not going to ease the pain for them if they had lost, 3 or 4 county finals and nothing to show for it. But even just see the pictures of the game last week, they just look so happy to have won this. And this is like, guys, for a lot of them, they had 3 football medals from 13, 14, 16. So, I mean, I just wonder, does that feed into it slightly? Will will they hurl a little bit more abandon? Look, it's just, there was very little between the teams the last day. I mean, I know that the margins, you say about 8 points and all that, but as the game developed, they looked pretty evenly matched to me. And obviously the fact that Loughmore drew level the initiative with them, then Thurles go ahead, and then Liam McGrath has to dig Loughmore out. So that's just from the Loughmore point of view, they're probably the two kind of interesting points. And then I suppose in a wider sense, like if you're looking at it, sometimes you feel you can reduce county finals a bit too much to county players. We were talking about the Cork final last week. I think you were saying, will it be the Lehan-Horgan shootout? And that's kind of what it ended up being. Like, no matter which way you look at this, it feels like whether it's the Mahers in defence on one side or the McGraths in attack on the other side, whichever one kind of has the bigger influence, it feels like that's going to be one of the big things that kind of swings it either side's way,
Andy, so we're talking about, or it feels like the country's even talking about when they're mentioning Tipperary, is Loughmore in the last few weeks and the run and the 17 weeks in a row as it will be at this stage. Thurles-Sarsfields must be loving this, because last week when Loughmore were training football, were playing football matches, Stars are getting ready for a big game. When people are, it kind of feels like everyone's nudging both towards Loughmore to win it, but also wanting Loughmore to win it.
Yeah, I think, Shane, it's the fairy tale thing, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? They're like, first of all, Loughmore-Castleiney are a fantastic club. Like, even, I remember back in the 90s, even they were getting to a football final one year, a hurling final the following year. And people were wondering how in the name of God are these, still producing it. But like the sons of those players now are playing at the moment, and they're just a fantastic club. Like 2 years in a row, both hurling and football finals. And as we saw last Sunday, they won the football final in the manner in which they won it, I suppose, as well. It was a reversal, really, of what happened the year before, where they were ahead and Commercials got the goal or at the end to win by a point. So, but like as regards with Thurles, I would say, Loughmore are very tough, they're very resilient. And I think Thurles kind of got to a stage where they were something like 7 or 8 points up and they were cruising. And I think there is a little bit of, I suppose, from my side of it looking in, there is a little bit of a lackadaisical kind of approach with Thurles when they're ahead. The worst thing that could happen to Thurles is to score early, get goals early, and because when they do go ahead, they tend to take the foot off the pedal. Whereas, if the game is in the melting pot a little bit more often, they probably would go ahead probably with 15 minutes to go at the right time, But like, I was just looking at scores, like 23 points, Loughmore scored 217. So, that's 23 scores to 19 scores in favour of Loughmore, if you look at it that way. And even though Thurles had 8 different scores, like to put up 23 points at this time of the year, and if a goal went in as well, like they had a couple of chances in the first half maybe to get a goal, Loughmore. But no, look, I think if Thurles turn up, if they hurl for the hour, I think they have the players to win it. Like they were on a phenomenal scoring spree all year, but seemingly, whatever happens at this time of the year, the Thurles style of play doesn't seem to work as well as it does in the summer, and like I think one thing that was very noticeable 2 weeks ago was that their half-forward line weren't winning any puckouts.
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking there's this talk that Ronan Maher was carrying a dead leg into the last game. There's always a chance that, like he did against Kildangan at stages in the semi-final, and as we've seen him do for Tip and Thurles over the years, that he'll take over, that Paddy Maher will put in another massive performance like he did against Kildangan, and that the ball going into the full forward line will work for a little longer than it did the last day. I mean, obviously, Dennis Maher got a bit of joy and he got his 2 goals in the first half, but Paddy Creedon in his first final was a little bit quiet. Pa Burke had an excellent first half. But like there is always the chance that full forward line and the 2 Mahers will take over.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if the 2 Mahers take over, then you imagine that the service of ball going into that full forward line is going to be kind of frequent, is going to be really kind of favourable towards them. Like 2 of the things Andy said is interesting because it didn't really affect them in the end, but if you think back to the quarterfinal against Clonakilty, they got 2 early goals in that game as well, and then they just had a bit of a slump in the third quarter, and suddenly it got to the water break in the second half, and you were thinking out of nowhere, the game that looked like it was going to be over at half time, and maybe Clonakilty had a way back into it, but ultimately the gap was probably a bit too great, and they kind of had enough work done. Whereas I think the most complete performance of the year from what I've seen was the Kildangan game. Thought it was a really, really high quality game. They started well, then Kildangan came back into it with, I think Sean Hayes got the goal with Billy Seymour, but then in the second half, you had the guys really getting on top in defence. The 2 Mars, maybe the ball into them was slightly kind of favouring, but they really were kind of lording it there, and that was the kind of platform and the launch pad, and then obviously Paddy Creedon in particular kind of cut loose up front. So, the Creedon threat was probably a bit advertised, a lot more kind of pay more attention to him then, and that kind of freed it up a bit for the Dennis Maher goals, obviously early on, and then Pa Burke getting the 5 points. But it's a lot of it is, as well as I think we kind of touched on this after the semi-finals, or after the drawn game, in terms of the ball into the defence. You really have to kind of keep it away from Ronan Maher, don't you? Because obviously he's the length of his striking and with his ability to kind of influence proceedings, whether it's a ball full forward line where he's putting it over the bar. But it's just really interesting. You don't get much injury updates, the exact extent of them with inter-county players during the summer, but this feels to me like a county final where you're talking about Ronan Maher's dead leg, and we've talked about Brian McGarr and John Maher. We're getting into the last Sunday in November. It feels like a lot is going to rest on, what sort of optimum fitness levels both are on. And it just comes back to, I think it's such a difficult game to call. Maybe that's a kind of a cliche going into a replay, but just the teams so seem kind of well matched that are these the small little kind of margins that are going to tip it either way.
Yeah, I just don't see SARS changing their setup too much or even their lineup too much. Andy, something we saw in the second half was Mickey Cahill going back from midfield to man-mark John McGrath. Is that something we might see from the start? And if Noel McGrath's Noel McGrath had an influence, don't get me wrong, and I thought particularly when he went corner forward, Davy Corbett will probably man-mark him everywhere again. So, number one, do you see that Mickey Cahill against John McGrath matchup happening? And could Noel McGrath play more inside?
I think Mickey, I was surprised actually. I know Mickey Cahill has probably played midfield all year now for Thurles, but I was surprised to see him in the middle of the field, especially in Semple Stadium, because it's the game has changed to the point now where one time it was 2 big men in the middle of the field. Now it's 2 small men in the middle of the field running fast. You know what I mean? They're always covering the ground. But I think myself that you mentioned there at the very start, John McGrath has won, I don't know, is it 5 man of the matches in a row now or something. And I know since the quarterfinal he scored something like 530. That's phenomenal scoring from one player. So you'll have to put your best marker on him. And look, there's no doubt about it. We've known it from old Mickey Cahill is a serious man marker. You know what I mean? He's able to read the game. He's played there. He's won All Irelands in that position. So they're going to have to curtail the influence of John McGrath. I'd say Noel McGrath is just such a wily player that he could slot out midfield, he could slot wing forward and into the full forward line as well, But look, I think you just wonder sometimes is the running game that Loughmore kind of have brought in a little bit through the football as well, is that going to catch up with them eventually? Because I don't know how many weeks they've been out now at the moment. And, is it going to, after playing a county final and going all the way to the wire again last Sunday, can you go to the wire again, the following Sunday? And, and like say, if Loughmore do win it, they're up against the winners then, I think, of Ballygunner and Ballyea the following, in a fortnight after that, I think, is that the football then is in between. So they have a busy schedule ahead of them. So it's going to be hard to see how, if they do, if Loughmore are going to get over the line here, fitness is going to be a big thing. But the one thing I just did notice about it, Shane, is it's kind of in their DNA in Loughmore to kind of stay in touch and to keep going. But the big thing is, for the likes of Thurles to win here on Sunday, it's important to not leave that door open, because we've seen it in games even in the last couple of games. You leave the door open for Loughmore and no better crew to take it, because whether it is football or hurling, they seem to have that. They just keep going to the whistle. They love that jersey. They fight for it. I think they played in the league stages of the championship earlier on in the year, and Thurles hammered them. I think was it in the mid championship? Yeah, and I suppose they didn't perform that day, but they're after whatever the deficit was that day. They're after closing it big time. And look, I give them every chance, but I think Thurles could be the fresher side going in here on Sunday.
Yeah, and just a reminder to people out there, please do subscribe to the channel, especially on YouTube, bottom right-hand corner, but subscribe on all the other social channels as well. If you want the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame, £5 a month, great way to support the channel. And also, just a reminder, we are brought to you by Torpy and the bamboo stick. They are currently sold out. They're going to be more in next week, so keep an eye out on torpy.ie. I think Paddy Creedon of SARS is going to be using a bamboo stick. I know we've mentioned him already, but I'm pretty sure he used it. So just prediction time then. Fintan, put that neck on the block.
I'm going to go for Loughmore, just about to shade it. And just to touch on one thing Andy said there, which I think is interesting about, he talks about leaving the door open. What I found interesting in the last two games that Loughmore played in hurling in terms of the comebacks, that they haven't needed a goal. I mean, I know they got the goal at the very end against Thurles-Loughmore, but by that stage, they had reeled them in with points and got ahead, which is you think in hurling a lot of times if team is 8 points down, like they were in the drawn game, or if they were trailing, I think was it by 5 against Thurles-Loughmore at one stage. I'm not completely sure what the margin was. They're going to need a goal to kind of instigate this comeback, but it's an amazing part of their resilience. They're able to just tip away at points, chip away at kind of deficit and kind of reel teams in. And the other thing I do think in their favour this year, maybe they might just get over the line. I think Liam McGrath's return, we saw he obviously popped up with 3 points, obviously the most important one of all in the drawn game. Just gives them an extra dimension of a quality attacker that they didn't have last year. I think it's desperately hard to call, but yeah, I'm gonna go for Loughmore to keep that winning run going.
Andy,
I would probably. I'd love to see Loughmore do the double. I think it would be unbelievable feat for a small club. I just think maybe freshness could be an issue here next Sunday, and I think Thurles will eventually get over the line here on Sunday. But they'll have to play from the start, and they'll have to keep going to the finish, because if, as I said earlier, if they leave the door open, or if they take the foot off the pedal at all here, I think Loughmore could be on for the double. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to go with Thurles though. I'm going to go with Thurles.
I think SARS have no excuses here. I mean, they have some excellent players. They have an awful lot of lads that play the tip at different levels. They've been able to relax, get all the bodies right the last 2 weeks, I suppose, by the time the match comes around. Maybe Ronan Maher will be at 100% in this game. They have the scorers. Loughmore obviously have injury concerns around John Maher. Brian McGrath, his thumb, is he going to be at 100%? He obviously played pretty well in the drawn game, so maybe he will be. So, but I think the excuses, there's no excuses for SARS here. I think they should deliver in this game, so I'll just about give them the nod there. The Munster quarterfinal, well, Munster is throwing in this weekend. Ballyea against Ballygunner. The winner will be against the Tipperary champions. But obviously, as a Ballygunner man, we'll come to you first, Andy. And just even a point that Fintan was making to me is the 1:15 throw-in on Sunday. That's a serious trek of 2.5 hours for Ballygunner before they even get going in the match.
Absolutely. And I suppose it could have been worse, because if Ina Kilnamona won it, we could be going out to Milltown Malby. So I suppose we're getting a little bit of a break that way, that it's in Ennis at least. Look, it's a serious trek. It's an earlier time as well, but look, we're waiting for nearly over 6 weeks now for this game, and the lads have prepared well. the football championship has been on down here as well. So a few of them have been playing the football, so they haven't really had a chance really to do a whole lot of hurling, bar except train with the lads, you know. But yeah, look, they've done very well in Waterford over the last couple of years. The lads know themselves that, you know, one Munster title to show for that. They probably want to get a second one to put with it. So the closest game they've had really all year down here has been the Mount Sion game. So I was in at that myself, and I'm lucky to get out of it. So, you know, and then the cruise past Loughmore in the county final, that game was put to bed fairly early. So, look, they're playing well. They hadn't been playing well in the championship earlier on in the year. And just coming towards the quarterfinal, semi-final, they started picking it up. They had a little bit of a wobbly moment there in the semi-final, but definitely in the final, they looked to be back to the Ballygunner, I suppose, of old, that they started passing the ball around to well to one another and picking off their scores.
Please get your comments in. Let us know who you think will win this game, who will win any other games, and any other topics we're touching on throughout the show. Fintan, it's the 3rd of October since Ballygunner were out. It's going to be the 28th of November by the time they line out. Do you see that being much of an issue for Ballygunner? I
suppose it's got to be a small issue. I suppose the one thing in their favour is how experienced they are at this stage of the competition, you know. And I guess they won't lack motivation, because obviously, given how impressive they were in last year's Waterford Championship, you know, I think, you know, they were one of the clubs. I mean, you know, 6 Mile Bridge were kind of vocal. A lot of clubs were very hopeful that there was going to be some kind of a Munster club that was going to be played. Those teams would have been in counties kind of in August, September. Obviously, the way the COVID situation went, people realised come January that wasn't going to be a runner, and the club championships weren't going to take place last year. Like I said, obviously they have all the experience. They came through the Waterford Championship in different ways in terms of surviving the kind of that battle against Mount Sion, then obviously you know, cruising past kind of Loughmore. But it was just interesting. Like, I was looking at it, like it's been interesting, the trend that they always seem to kind of face in this quarter final. You know, like, it's obviously, you think the other side of the draw, you only have one semi with Kilmarnock play Middleton, and then you're into the final. But I was looking at, like, in 2017, they played Thurles-Loughmore in a quarter, and then 6 Mile Bridge in a semi before they even got to the final. 2018, they played Middleton, and then Ballyea, obviously, like that after extra time, before they even got to the final. And then 2019, it was 6 Mile Bridge and Patrick's. Well, had a lot of games, I suppose, at home, having had the home advantage in Walsh Park. But in fairness, you know, Andy might have been at this game. One of their most complete performances, just having read it, but at the time, was against 6 Mile Bridge at this stage 2 years ago. So while we're talking kind of the trek is obviously an issue, and maybe Ennis is that bit further than 6 Mile Bridge, they certainly seem to cope with it and prepare with it that day. Like 121 to 12 points win against a team who were experienced, with won a couple of county titles in Clare, but were kind of blowing off the pitch. Obviously the way Ballygunner kind of played that day. And I just, you know, you kind of think it from the outside, you know, there's got to be a serious intent about them at this stage, you know. You know, Desi Hutchinson obviously was an addition since 2018. There's obviously been a couple more young players coming in, and the obviously big factor, which we'll probably kind of get into at the moment, obviously, is the fact that Tony Kelly isn't in the opposition lineup. It's obviously be wary of Ballyea with what happened 3 years ago, which was, I think, one of the great match-saving goals with what Philip Manny did in that game, with the way he just kind of ran up, and I think it was Conor Power was it kind of lobbed it in. And he managed to get the overhead strike, and then they obviously kind of pulled away in extra time. So that is probably maybe one thing in their favour in terms of probably guarding them against this. You know, I think Verney talked on Monday about the fact they played Rapparees in a challenge. You know, so I presume they'll be kind of keeping busy, and they're obviously so experienced, and I think they're kind of such a well-drilled outfit, you know, that I don't think they'll be using that kind of preparation long layoff as an excuse.
Yeah, and that question, but also Andy S. Law says, how does Andy think this Ballygunner team compares with the previous years? And I suppose even as an extension of that, the team that probably were so disappointed with losing to Thurles-Loughmore in the muck and the dirt down in Páirc Uí Rinn a couple of years ago. No doubt
you love that one, Shane.
Yeah, it cut me up to bring up that. But like, that had to cut up Ballygunner, because I think everyone just assumed they were going to win that game, and then it became a battle and a fight, and it didn't come through it. And maybe some people didn't recognise the quality of Thurles-Loughmore at the time, but people just kind of decided, Ballygunner weren't able for the fight.
Yeah, look, that has been kind of, I suppose, laid at our door a little bit. You know, look, we haven't had a great record. Like, we've had a great record in Munster in terms of winning championship games and getting to finals. Our record in finals hasn't been great. So I suppose, to answer your question, Deirdre, how do I put this team versus previous teams? I think probably Ballygunner were stronger in 2018 than they probably are at the moment. You know what I mean? They've lost a few players over the last couple of years. So, but one thing I will say is that the Waterford Championship is allowing the lads to rejuvenate, get in new players there as well, you know, and give them a huge amount of experience playing senior club level. Even though, although, you know, albeit beating teams fairly well down here in Waterford, I still think that little bit of experience of playing championship hurling stands them. And, you know, the lads are very good as well. The likes of the Mannies and you know, Barry Coughlin, Stephen O'Keefe, these lads, they're very good to the younger lads coming in because they obviously make them feel part of it. And, you know, they get them kind of, I suppose, into the dressing room as quick as possible. And, you know, you can see it already that there's another team coming again now for another couple of years. But look, just to go back to, I suppose, the Thurles-Loughmore game, that was a game that I suppose we went down, you know, with a lot of confidence, I suppose, really, you know, thinking that, you know, we'd been playing very well all year. We'd come through a tough battle again. And I suppose, you know, we can blame conditions, we can blame everything else. But ultimately, I think what killed us a little bit that day was the physical side of it. But also the type of game that we play is a kind of a short game through the lines. And we met a juggernaut in Thurles-Loughmore in terms of physicality, but they also were a little bit more direct. And I think at this time of the year, Jane, you know it yourself, and Fitz, you've seen them as well. You know, all the teams like Na Piarsaigh and Coola and all these teams, you know, at this time of the year, it's important to be able to go direct as well. And I think that day against Thurles-Loughmore, Ballygunner didn't go as direct as we probably could have, but and it ultimately cost us, you know. But that's not to take away from Thurles-Loughmore. Thurles-Loughmore were very good that day.
Yeah, and I'm going through the team here that played against Rowan Moore in the Waterford final, and what a spine to the team, like Stephen O'Keefe in goals, then Ian Kenny, county man, Barry Coughlin, former county fullback, Shane O'Sullivan, centre back, obviously former county man, Desi Hutchinson, Peter Hogan, who's really established himself this year, and Pádraig Mahoney is back in again. So there is no shortage of quality there. Do you think a lot of teams are beaten in Waterford before they even get out onto the field with Ballygunner? Andy,
I think there is, Shane. I think there's look, like my take on, you know, in fairness to Ballygunner have their house in order down here in Waterford in terms of the work that's going in at juvenile level, the work that's all the older players that would have been there in the 90s, early 90s are back coaching teams at juvenile level, you know. There's huge work going into development. You know, Jerry Cullinan is the chairman of the club. He's put in huge work into the development of the club over the last couple of years, following on from, I suppose, all the work that Pat O'Sullivan would have done previously. So from that end of it, you know, Ballygunner are ahead of the game here in Waterford. And but I suppose to answer your question, a lot of clubs are going out on the field now. And I think before they go out, they're nearly setting up with a sweeper system because they're trying to minimise the damage, you know. And a sweeper system, Ballygunner are used to playing sweeper systems because they played a lot down here in Championship. Not because they want to, but because other teams forced them into doing it, you know.
Andy, can you maybe just give us an insight into the Mannies in terms of, like, is Philip definitely out for the whole season now in terms of injury? And just from having watched him at club level, like, how is Pádraig kind of been moving? Obviously, he's had so many kind of injury issues and is kind of obviously such an experienced player, but how would you kind of have assessed him in the knockout stages in Waterford?
Yeah, well, look, Philip had two very bad kind of unusual kind of breaks in his leg this year, just below the knee, I think, on both of them, would you believe it? So he's on the mend, he's on the way back, he's back in training now, and he's playing matches and what have you, albeit, you know, part of games and what have you. But Shane O'Sullivan has filled in at centre back for him. But the Mannies are a huge driving force behind this Ballygunner team. And, you know, Pádraig, you could see it against Mount Sion. He was a little bit sluggish coming back because I think it was his first game starting. And but like by the time he got to the final, even a couple of weeks later, or a week later even, he was a little bit better again. So, you know, he's starting to move a little bit better now as well. So, you know, if Ballygunner get all those lads back on the field, they'll be a formidable force, you know.
Yeah.
And where does Davey kind of rank for you at the moment? I mean, like his county final display, just watching on TV, was just exceptional. 1 line for play. Like you obviously played with Paul Flynn. Like since then, is Davey the kind of biggest X factor in terms of kind of an inside forward to kind of maybe take this team to the next level?
Yeah, I think Desi has been a huge addition to this Ballygunner team since he came back. Simply from the point of view, I suppose we lost Brian O'Sullivan a couple of years back as well. He retired. David O'Sullivan retired. So they were two big players for that team. And Brian was a huge player on the inside line. Desi has kind of come in. He's doing the same job now as Brian in that he's getting goals, he's getting points. He's the main talisman now on the forward line. He's the go-to man. And, he's similar to what Paul Flynn was, I suppose, back in my time playing, that, if you got the ball to him, it was generally a score, and we relied heavily on him at times as well, to win us matches, especially if we were a point down with about 5 minutes to go. But yeah, look, Desi has definitely come in. He's added that, as you said, that X factor to the team. But to be fair to the team themselves, they work very hard to get him the ball. And, Pádraig Manny is very instrumental in that as well, because, not alone does he get a couple of scores himself, but he's very instrumental in moving the centre-back around and creating space for Desi, so they work together well in partnership,
Yeah. We haven't really talked too much about Ballyea so far, but look at their Munster title win 5 years ago, as it is at this stage. They beat Thurles after extra time. I think everyone remembers the Tony Kelly show that day, 4-18 to 2-22. And then in the final, fairly dismissed Glen Rovers, 121 to 210. So obviously they're a very impressive team. Without Tony Kelly, Fintan, is this one of these things where Ballygunner could be lulled into a false sense of security because TK isn't there?
It could be, it's obviously a natural thing to think about, obviously given he is the standout player not only in Ballyea ranks but obviously in the Clare ranks at the moment. But you go back to, you just think that they are going to be kind of battle hardened enough and experienced enough not to kind of get, I suppose, sucked into that. From Ballyea's point of view, obviously without him, it's a huge blow. I think now the fact that they're getting out of Clare, I think they're going to be beating kind of a higher quality opposition. But the fact that it's on in Cusack Park and Ennis, and if you look at the way they won the Clare Championship, they're an incredibly battle hardened outfit themselves. I mean, they came from behind with a late goal against Newmarket and Fergus to get a goal. I think it was a point up at that stage, and then they went 2 and Newmarket pulled it back, but they won by 1. Similar story against Kilmona. I think they got, was it 4 the last 5 points, and won by a point that day. So as we were talking earlier about Loughmore, kind of never know when they're beaten. There's definitely that characteristic being kind of showcased in the Ballyea side at the moment. And the longer the year goes on, they just seem an incredibly battling side. Maybe this is kind of a bit of an unfair characteristic, but it seems like there's an element of kind of the footballers kind of slogging it out for them, huge men around the middle with like Colin O'Connor, I suppose, is an addition now. And obviously Gary Brennan will be kind of well known for his kind of input that way, but really, really strong defensive backbone with Jack Brown and Paul Flanagan. Brennan around the middle, don't you see the point he got against Kilmona was absolutely exceptional when he kind of ran down the right wing and put it over. And then they probably are one of the best club free takers in the country in DC. Aaron Griffin, I think, is another new guy that wouldn't be there a couple of years ago. So, the Tony Kelly thing is one thing, but I would think if you're the Ballygunner management, I would think the main piece of evidence you're showing in terms of not making them into any sort of complacency is that 2018 semi-final when Kenny was playing that day, but I still think Ballygunner would have been favoured beforehand to win that game. And like I said, it took kind of a miraculous goal from Philip Manny to kind of dig them out of it, So I think that would be enough to kind of put them on the guard heading up there on Sunday. But it will be interesting, the Ballyea is probably won their third Clare title a bit unexpected, given the fact that once Kelly was out, I presume most people would have felt that it was kind of maybe, Kilmona probably would come inside with all that kind of underage success and all that. So again, is the pressure off slightly on Ballyea now heading into Munster?
Yeah, and I think it was you that mentioned it. Didn't they win the quarter, semi, and final all by a point, which obviously shows serious kind of, I think, metal going down in the last 10 minutes. And I'm looking through the Ballyea team here, and I'm looking at Paul Flanagan, 3, who we've mentioned, Jack Brown at 6, Gary Brennan midfield, Pierce Lillis, Niall Deasy. That's a serious spine to a team. Now, maybe I'm wrong, Andy, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Jack Brown go and man-mark Desi Hutchinson here. But, Ballygunner will surely look at that team and think there's quality all over.
Look, there is quality all over. As you mentioned there, Ballyea, have shown massive resilience to come through a lot of these matches. Tony Kelly was injured. I think they brought him on for one game and they ended up winning it by a point as well, So, like I said, going down the home straight, when they're facing defeat, they really show true grit, really, to come out. But And to do it again, I suppose, in the final, to do all that again without Tony Kelly was an unbelievable feat in itself. But the one thing I noticed about the actual Clare County final is that, and look, it's something that, we would pride ourselves in, that we have a good backline, and I would say that, looking at the game, Ballyea dominated possession, but their scoring or their shooting left them down. I just felt that Kilmona were a little bit more, I suppose, economical in possession when they got the chance for scored. I think there's something like, I read somewhere it was 46% shooting rate for Ballyea and 61% for Kilmona, and yet Ballyea came out on top by a point. So look, there's great grit, there's great determination. Niall Deasy and Gary Brennan are great players for him as well. And I think the last time they played in 2018, you mentioned there earlier, extra. I think it went to extra time. Yeah, that Philip scored that goal. But really, Ballyea probably, and we were lucky to get a second bite at that. Really, we were lucky to get back in there for extra time, because Ballyea on the day, Tony Kelly was in unbelievable form, and he was nearly unmarkable, So, like, we got our break that day, and we went down and won the Munster Championship. So it's on small little margins that these games are won, and we'd be hoping. I suppose they're going to feel they have a point to prove, or a little thing to get back at Ballygunner for that loss, and I suppose Ballygunner win. But it'll be hard to see him doing it without Tony Kelly.
A question for you. We did a power rankings the other day in terms of like the club power rankings, which team is most likely to win it, which team is the best. I'll bring it up here for you, Andy, just to see. So, and this is all teams that are still in the competition. We have Shamrocks at number 1, Shamrocks at Ballyhale, Ballygunner 2, Thomas's, Schlockneil, Crokes, Loughmore, Middleton, Kilmallock, Dunloy at 9, and Clarenbridge at 10. Now, obviously, there's some other clubs in the county that are in the country that probably have to come through tougher championships and might say that they should be up the list. But look, they're gone out of the championship. Do you see the Shamrocks, who we were obviously over with and won an All-Ireland with back in 2015, do you see them as still being number 1? And what is it about them having been inside the camp?
I think first and foremost for them, the Kilkenny Championship is the holy grail for them, no more than the Dan Breen Cup is the holy grail for either Loughmore. I didn't see Thurles-Loughmore on that list, actually.
No, this is the thing, like, because we kind of picked Loughmore to win it. I think there was Verney and Finton had already voted that Loughmore would win it. So, there was no need for me to vote at all.
So say it not to say anything, basically, is what happened. Yeah.
Right to say nothing. But yeah, go and take up that point. Yeah, bashes.
Yeah, well, look, I would just say that, I suppose Ballyhale Shamrocks, as I mentioned, their Kilkenny is the main championship for them. And when they do come out, they think in terms of the Leinster club. And if they get out of that, they think in terms of the All-Ireland. So they take it one game at a time, as opposed to at the very start of the year, we're going to win an All-Ireland, And that's not the way they look at it. So, but I suppose the one thing I would say, they're good, honest hurling people, no more than, I suppose, when Borsley got to the Munster final and won it there a couple of years back. And the same way, like, Borsley met Ballyhale that time, and a small little thing would have swung the result in their favour, But Ballyhale are good passers of the ball. Their forwards are phenomenal at the moment now. I think they have 4 of the forwards are in with the, well, they either played inter-county or were with the inter-county setup, And in the backs, they've probably 3 or 4 of the backs that if they get them all onto the field. But the thing I would say about Ballyhale is probably the weak point. If I was to pick one weak point, I would say it's the panel. And I think if and I'm sorry now, someone ringing me. If there was anything, sorry now, if anything, I would say that Ballyhale, the panel isn't as strong, and that's where I think the likes of Ballygunner, Kilmallock, these teams might benefit if they do get out of Munster,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Like, it's hard to think as there been a better club forward line, in terms of the fact that we probably got to go back years to probably kind of offer an accurate comparison, but to have, like, you had TJ, you had Henry, obviously, then the baton is passed on to like TJ and Colin kind of take it on, but to have an addition of 2 young players like Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen come into it over the last couple of years, it just feels like, to be honest, when you watch it, like, if you watch one of them, if one of them has a quiet day, there's always going to be someone is there just able to pick up the scoring slack. And like watching the Kilkenny final, it was noticeable that maybe, the standards you judge TJ at, you're expecting absolutely massive scores from play, but he seemed to come out then and he just got involved and he kind of floated a few deliveries. And I don't know, like once they've got over that test, like the fact that they're like, it was it last year, the James Stephens, it was the semi-final that seemed to be the big massive test in terms of the game. It was very close, or that might have been a quarter. This year it's the Loughlin's one in the final. That it's kind of all systems going now in terms of kind of moving on to Leinster, having got over that, and just the quality of that forward line is unbelievable. I think it's about Leinster Rangers and or start of the week, Andy. I think obviously you know Conor Phelan quite well. I think he's over them this year, so I suppose he's been working with the lads at Kilkenny. It'll be interesting kind of taking them on now and trying to stop them in the Leinster club stage.
Yeah, I think Mount Leinster Rangers could be a bit of a banana skin for Ballyhale. I know James O'Connor as well, obviously, with Ballyhale, because he played with him at Waterford. But I think Mount Leinster Rangers are a good outfit. You know, they're very tough. But just to back up your point there, Fintan, Ballygunner played them in 2019 All-Ireland semi-final, and they held Colin Fennelly and TJ Reid scoreless. And yet,
Right.
you know what I mean, they still couldn't win the game. Because, just to back up your point, other lads stepped up to the plate. And you know, when you'd analyse the game afterwards, they still managed to score 110 from play to Ballygunner's 3 points. You know, so they are a serious outfit. They can be got at. I think they can be got at. I think a young team can get at them. Mount Leinster Rangers mightn't be as young as they were. Do you know what I mean? They mightn't be bringing through as many young players as they were before, but they'll still give them a fair game. But they're only ever a couple of points away from Ballyhale. But just looking at your power ratings there, Shane, Slaughtneil are the team to watch as well. You know, Slaughtneil are a serious outfit. You know, I think you remember, was it a year or two ago, they played Ballyhale, and it was a very close game, you know. I think Ballyhale were probably lucky to come away with the win that day, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And another question I wanted to ask you, Andy, is just about, and I know all about transferring myself, but like obviously you went down to Waterford. So you probably knew what Liam Cahill was facing into when he comes in as an outside manager. Now, maybe being a manager is very different to being a player when you change over. But can I ask you, how long did it take for him to be accepted? And then when there was the whole will he, won't he, and decided to stay with Waterford, were you as shocked as the rest of us were?
How long did it take him to be accepted? I say when he won the first championship game. I think they were delighted, you know, because we went 2 or 3 years down here without winning the championship game, and you know, I think, look, I suppose the players accepted him quicker, you know, once he got on board at all and he spoke their language. But you know, he's a good coach there as well, in Mikey Beavens, and Mikey's done very well with the team as well. You know, they've got him playing to a good system, albeit come up short against Limerick twice in the last 2 years. But like, you know, I think knowing Liam and looking at the way he's played over the last, you know, he set his teams up over the last couple of years. Everything is based, the game plan is based on work rate. And, you know, if no matter how good the hurler is, if the player isn't prepared to work, they generally don't start, you know. You know, so, sorry, what was the second question there, Shane? Sorry, what did you say the second one was?
And then, you know, just when it was announced that he was staying with Waterford rather than going with Tipperary, we were live on the show here, and I'd say the stunned look on my face was much to the amusement of non-Tipperary people. But were you stunned when he decided to stay with Waterford rather than take over the Tip job?
Well, to be honest, like I couldn't believe that he turned down the Tipperary job, because, you know, if you're a Tipperary native and, you know, that's your goal, is to, you know, if you're into management and all that, and you're going for interview or whatever for a Tipperary job, that's the end goal, is to get that job. You know what I mean? And I couldn't believe it that he stayed with Waterford. But from a Waterford point of view, it was the best thing ever, because it was like a huge sense of relief down here for a lot of hurling people, you know, because he's done a lot of good things down here with players, and he's brought them on a lot. And again, a little bit like what Colin Bonner is doing at the moment in Tipperary, he's prepared to go to a lot of junior clubs as well to look for players. There's no problem there at all, you know. Liam doesn't care where they come from or what club they're with. If they're good enough and they fit, I suppose, if they have the traits that he's looking for, he's going to go with them, you know. And Mikey Beavens is very similar. So it was a big win for Waterford on that front. But lost to Tipperary. But I think Colin Bonner coming in now, I think, you know, I suppose everyone had it in their hearts that Liam Cahill was going to come in, and it didn't work out. So I suppose when Colin got the job, they were kind of a little bit, I suppose, wondering what way would he approach it or whatever, and how things would run, or how would he be accepted, I suppose, with the players, but and the supporters. But in fairness to him, I have to say, you know, like even from, being up home and, talking to local people, like they like the idea of the Miller Shield and all this going on, and that he's prepared to look through each of the divisions, scour through them for players. So it'll be all, we'll know next, we'll know the first round of the championship, how everything is going.
We certainly will. Fintan, do you want to take up that point, or we move on?
Yeah, I suppose it's just going to be really interesting. The fixture list came out the other day. I think we're looking at kind of an April start for the Munster Championship. And like that game in Walsh Park, like it just, kind of maybe unseasonal to have such an April showdown, that's going to be so pivotal. Like, but I think it's the same weekend Cork play Limerick in Cork at the round final. So just to say, I think it's some way for the Munster Championship to start with the return of the round robin games, and to have the two of those on that weekend, whenever it's I think it's middle of April when it's starting off.
Yeah, not to mention having Henry Shefflin in Leinster as Galway manager. We'll see how Darragh Egan gets on also with Wexford. So it's there's so much to look forward to. Yeah. Andy, just before we let you go, there's obviously some Munster intermediate matches this weekend, and one we wanted to ask you about was Dunhill of Waterford against Smith O'Brien's of Clare. Now the winners will play the winner of the Tipperary final, they will play the winners of Moyne against Kilmiley. So what are your thoughts? Would you know much about Dunhill? Yeah, well,
I suppose the only thing I would know about Dunhill, obviously they were up senior for a couple of years, and I was playing against them, and they came up from the intermediate grade, they went back down again. Then I don't know, did they stay up for a year or two and went back down again? But they've done very well. Tom Casey's back in there. Tom was a Waterford player back in the 80s, I suppose. In the early 80s, got to a couple of Munster finals against Cork, and anytime Tom has been involved with Dunhill, they seem to be winning. So he's back involved with them this year. They've got back up to the senior rank after winning the intermediate. So the teams that Tom have, he instills a bit of pride in the jersey, I suppose, is the big thing with him. Because I suppose you probably wouldn't have noticed, Shane, but when you're living down here, you kind of you hear of all the top clubs in the county, and Dunhill was one of the top clubs. Everyone knows about Mount Sion and Ballygunner as well, but Dunhill was one of the top clubs in Waterford there, and they held a lot of tournaments back in the day that the likes of Glen Rovers and all these teams would be going to. And I suppose they're proud of having their senior status. They're proud to be called a senior club, and they've a lot of good people involved with the club down there. So they're working very hard, I suppose, really to try and get players back up to a standard where they can start competing again at senior. But with regards to this intermediate game, I'd give him a good chance against Smith O'Mahony's. I wouldn't be familiar with him with Smith O'Mahony's that much, but knowing the players that are there in Dunhill, I'd give him a good chance. I thought I'd turn off this phone, but she keeps ringing.
We'll let you go now in a second anyway, Andy. You can give an hour shout back. But so that'd be Dunhill against Smith O'Brien's. Look, Andy, you've been brilliant with your time. Really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll be chatting to you again very soon.
No problem, man. Thanks very much for having me here. Thank you.
Cheers, Andy.
See you.
Okay, so that was Andy Moloney. So, Fintan, obviously we had that Smith O'Brien's against Dunhill game. Now, neither of us would have seen all that much of either of those teams, so we're kind of talking around it as much as we're talking into it. But just some of the recent Munster intermediate winners I'm looking at there. 2019, Father O'Neill's of Cork. 2018, Charleville. 2017, Canturk. And you could go back to 2016, since Lismore won it when Dan and Maura Shanahan were playing, among others, since a team that isn't from Cork won it. Now, the Tipperary the Tipperary contestant this year is Moyne Temple Tui, who beat Kilsheal and Kilcash in the Tip intermediate final, which is the third tier. So maybe next year with the rejig and the renaming, obviously we know how silly some of the tiers being named are in Cork, for example. But like this is the question about this is, can Cork's dominance be broken?
Yeah, I should meant to bring it up, but only there just to say that it's been confirmed that the Ballyea Ballygunner game is live on TG Cahir on Sunday. So that's kind of, people will be interested in that because the Connacht club football has been postponed. So I think there's people kind of giving out that the football games weren't up to much. They're watching on TV last Sunday, so you've two pretty good hurling games now back to back on Sunday. Ballyea Ballygunner and then followed by Loughmore Thurles. So I suppose the Munster intermediate thing, like, I think historically, when you look at this across the board in hurling football, a lot of this depends on the county's ranking systems. Like, for example, like Kerry's dominance of the Munster intermediate football, the ninth best team in the county, ninth best club team in the county goes forward to the intermediate championship. Whereas, say, the Cork counterparts, they'll be the 25th best team in Cork. or I remember Mark Hart bringing this up when he was in charge of Pomeroy. I think they were going to be the 19th. I think it was Mark Hart. They were the 19th best side coming out of Tyrone. Similarly, Kilkenny, like the 13th best side of the intermediate. Like, so you're looking at Tipperary good record. Why is the Tipperary record being so bad in intermediate? And you'd have to think next year, would be an example in the coming years will kind of strengthen their case, because it is difficult. Mind table 2, are is the 33rd best team, right? And so after this 32 senior teams, technically up against the Kerry senior champions. I suppose they are at home and they do have the advantage of having played recently. But like, I suppose one of the reasons why Cork have been kind of so strong is just simply like the size of the county, and when intermediate has been the second grade over the last couple of years. And like you look at that Cantork team, they last Sunday, now they're up to the top level of senior hurling. Charleville are in the top level of senior hurling now. When you guys like say Davy Fitzgerald was the star of that Charleville team, they were coached by Ben O'Connor, Cantork and Aidan Walsh, Clough-Ballacolla. They're now coached by Frankie Flannery. They would have had kind of high profile guys in the past. Obviously, at Anthony Nash, just seems to be a lot of kind of bigger names. Seem to be kind of floating about the kind of intermediate
they were
grades.
common teams, weren't they? Charleville and Cantork.
Yeah, and sorry, Father O'Neill's would have been another one. Like they got to the final against, no surprise, it was Tyrone. Like it does seem to be in a kind of Cork and Kilkenny kind of dominance generally over the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see whether that kind of levels out.
And like a lot of people in Tipperary are looking at it and thinking, if Templederry Kenyans, who won the second tier, the Seamus O'Reen, if they were going through, that they might get all the way to an All-Ireland. Now, maybe Mine Temple too will do just the same. Like they've Grode O'Connor, they've Conor Bowe, who's a tip under 20 a couple of years ago. Tossie Hamill played in an All-Ireland final in 2016, came on in that game. Paul Maher, sub-keeper for the 2019 All-Ireland. But, a lot of people in Tip would be thinking, geez, Templederry would potentially go all the way as team number 17 in the county.
Yeah, you'd have to think so. And I suppose it will be borne out over the next couple of years to kind of see how that second time does. But, I haven't seen Mine Temple 2 play, but like you read off the names you have. I think John Colin is cornerback, isn't he? And he was on the 2010, I think it was, under 3-1 team that won the Hurling Ireland. And he obviously would be a very experienced footballer as well. Like, so they do seem to have a good few recognisable inter-county names. Conor Bowe and Gerard O'Connor definitely added a good bit to the Tipperary under-20 sides over the last couple of years. We've seen Bowe, like he's absolutely brilliant for UCC down here in the Cork Senior Hurling Championship in game they played this year. So he's obviously very kind of talented forward. And like it is kind of interesting the fact that Kilmiley are coming out of Kerry, haven't played in a long while. The Kerry champions used to be in the Munster Senior Championship. Say when their manager John Myler would have been starting off, they kind of nearly caught Blackrock one year. Then kind of took a couple of beatings off Timmy Vara. But like Kerry teams haven't made much of an impression. The Munster intermediate. Kilmiley got to that final the time they beat, the time they lost to Loughmore in 16. I think Ballyduff got to a final as well. But generally they haven't managed to kind of make much of an impression. And in terms of kind of, I suppose, closing the gap, probably not helped by the fact that they've had such kind of long layoff now. I know they had a challenge match recently enough against Courcy Rovers of Cork, who are in the Cork Premier Intermediate final this week. And so I suppose they've been trying to kind of keep busy that way. But I suppose we're talking earlier about kind of long treks up. And I definitely think it's a good thing to do the home and away in a club championship because, like, for example, I think it's fantastic that Temple 2 are able to host this game themselves on Sunday. I mean, it must be incredibly exciting, such an occasion for the club, as opposed to having to, bring it into Shefflin Stadium or whatever for the day. But it's a fair old trek from Kilmiley. I think it's about 2.5 hours as well to kind of get up for that game. So interesting that for the draw parallels, Ballygunner and Kilmiley, the long treks and both got long sides out of long time out of action since their semi-finals. But it's just very hard to kind of read these grades, isn't it? Because of the fact that senior champions from one county versus, as we said, the 33rd. Probably when you get to your kind of semi-final stage, you probably have a bit more kind of form to go on. Yeah,
it's true. Just for anyone who doesn't remember, September 19th, since Kilmiley beat St. Brendan's in their final 114 to 111, they're now top of the Kerry Roll of Honour with 26 titles. So the Cork Premier Intermediate final, is that basically the second tier? It's hard to keep up. Is that basically the second tier that's just underneath senior?
No, the third tier. So there's 12 teams in every grade. So there's 12 Premier Senior teams, there's 12 Senior A teams, and then there's 12 Premier Intermediate teams. So this is basically the 25th best team, shall we put it. But interesting enough, final 5 o'clock on Saturday. The winners of this will go forward to the Munster Championship. You basically have the team Castleiney, who lost last year's final, versus Courcy Rovers, who lost the 2018 final, I think it was. So both are pretty experienced. There'll be familiar names on both sides. People. Sean Toomey would be probably Corky Rover's main one. He's kind of a young guy who actually made the panel for the All-Ireland hurling final. He was kind of added to it after Ger Millerick was ruled out through injury for Limerick. And then obviously Castleiney's probably the bigger name, Niall O'Leary, who obviously was cornerback in that game, and Colin, which is probably one interesting thing to know that. And like we see this, like how do you get the most out of your club players or your county players at Club L? So O'Leary's a cornerback for the Cork Seniors, and Colin would have been regarded as a cornerback. But Spillane plays midfield and O'Leary plays centre forward. So it's obvious. Like Colin Barry is the Castleiney's fullback. He would have played Cork in the 21. So it's just interesting that, like the Sarsfield's coach, the manager is Kieran McGann, who would have played for Cork, and the coach by Johnny Crowley, who would have been over Sarsfield's teams that would run senior counties. But just thought it's an interesting one watching the last couple of weeks about how do you kind of maximise your talent. I mean, probably wouldn't be, it's probably not the best use of resources to play O'Leary at number 2 and Spillane at number 4 and just have a really solid full back line at that level. They obviously, you're trying to push them up the field, and obviously the way hurling has gone, you imagine cornerbacks that are kind of more comfortable playing at the field. O'Leary got a couple of points at various stages for Cork this summer. Yeah, so he's playing centre forward, so it's just an interesting one.
Yeah, and just to take on that point, I suppose Colin Barry, who you're saying is playing full back, he's there all year during the league matches before Colin Spillane, etc., comes back. So, I mean, the management are probably looking at it thinking, well, he's settled pretty well there, and it's the whole thing of where can we find a spot for Colin Spillane and Niall O'Leary, and they've got inter-county level of athleticism. We've got to make use of that and tell them just go for every ball and just hopefully that you'll break the opposition down because of your athleticism.
Absolutely, yeah. And like say McGann is the manager, he would have played for Cork, people done before. Obviously it's the club of Timmy McCarthy. So say when Spillane was kind of starting out, you would have had the two of them as your kind of midfield and half forward line options. I think their careers would have kind of overlapped at club level. They're obviously not playing anymore, so it obviously just leaves vacancies. And you see it at a different level. Like for example, Owen Murphy, obviously, we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's probably another example of the intermediate grade. Glenn Moore, the fact that he plays outfield, even though he's, arguably with Nicky Quaid, probably the best goalkeeper in the country, but it's just obviously they need something a little bit extra outfield. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes on Saturday. Then the winners of that play, I think it's Mungret, the Limerick champions.
Yeah.
And then the winners of the 2 months would be the quarterfinals, playoff and the semi-finals. So, it's a big competition, and the fact that it's back this year, I'm sure there's clubs all over the country that won intermediate and junior county titles last year, probably cursing the fact, they didn't get a chance to go and test themselves and just experience what it was like to play in the province. And obviously some clubs would have a bigger ambitions to go to the All-Ireland series. So I'm sure there's a lot of teams looking at these county finals now and these early provincial club championship games. Let's get past the December schedule and get into our provincial finals in January, and then we're a couple of weeks out from All-Ireland semis,
There's some Munster junior quarterfinals this weekend. Tralee Parnells are against Kahina Rinky of Tipperary. Ogonolo, whose Camogie team I think generally seems to appear in Munster, they're up against Bricky Rangers of Watford. Then the Leinster quarterfinals. Just a reminder, actually, please do subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free to do it, bottom right hand corner. If you want to support the channel, $5 a month, patreon.com, and you get all the audio podcasts. It's the only place to get them. And also we're brought to you by Torpy and their bamboo stick, which is currently sold out. But check out the website, torpy.ie, next week, and hopefully they'll be back in stock. They should be back in stock. So the Leinster quarterfinal this weekend, Raharney of Westmeath against Kilmacud Crokes of Dublin. So just to reflect on the county final that Raharney had, they beat Castletown Geoghegan 21 points to 18. Killian Doyle scored 11 points. Robbie Greville is obviously a very good player for them. You can see him for Westmeath. And I think Killian Doyle has been located in England or London for different parts, but Raharney manager Brendan McKeough said of him, God may have given him the gift, but when Killian came back from England, he had a long road in front of him. He went even further than we wanted him. So can Raharney, who put up 21 points in their county final, beat a Kilmacud Crokes team that put up 426 after extra time against Nafina just 2 weeks ago?
I think they can. It's you'd still probably be tipping Kilmacud to win this, but I mean, one thing about Leinster is that it does seem to have kind of proven a bit more maybe ripe for some kind of surprise results from the outside in terms of kind of the county teams. I mean, I suppose Raharney's big one, correct me if I'm wrong, was that they beat Kildare maybe about a decade ago. Obviously, you've seen Carlow sides kind of spring surprises, with Mount Leinster Rangers and St. Mullins. So I wonder, has that kind of led to the bigger county teams being kind of more on their guard in terms of kind of going down to these types of games? But I mean, Kilmacud have been kind of waiting for this chance for so long in terms of trying to win a Dublin title. suffering a few defeats. Obviously, it's 7 years since they were kind of last at this stage. The team, like you were talking about it, the complexion of the team has changed so much since then, in terms of the kind of makeup of it. And it's now, I suppose we saw Niall Corcoran in the Dublin County final. He was kind of coming down onto the sideline, kind of lending some advice and all that. He probably would have been one of the main guys kind of powering it. We saw Reynard Dwyer was on punditry duty, These were the kind of familiar names they were looking at it, whereas now it's like, I thought it was like Pádraig Lenihan, Cahill and Conway, then obviously Oisin O'Rourke and Ronan Hayes were really kind of catching the eye in the final. So again, they've had a couple of weeks to kind of come down after the high of that final. There's only one player involved, Brian Sheehy, in the football. So that isn't going to be an excuse in terms of comparison to, say, the Loughmore example we were using earlier. Probably going to look at that as well last Sunday, like the club. You must kind of feed off it. Like they're playing Wolf Cones of Meath the following Sunday, trip to Navan. In this game this weekend against Raharney, I think it's got to be on a high. And, I think you'd have to be tipping them to win it after, I suppose, the way they kind of stuck in there in the Dublin final. And then once they got that goal from Ronan Hayes, who looked like an exceptional form in extra time. Once he got that goal at the end of full time to pull them level, they really kind of did the business. There was only one side really in it, wasn't it, when you were looking at it in extra time then? Yeah,
it was a bit of a takeover, all right. Yeah, and when you mentioned like Matt Collins, who's obviously a Cork man, he was a key part of Crokes for a long time. Since the 2018 final, he's not there anymore. Niall Corcoran's not there. Ryan O'Dwyer, Ross O'Carroll and Sean McGrath, who were both in and out of the Dublin setup for a while, all former inter-county players have left. The Crokes have won 3 Dublin A minor titles from 2018 to 2020. I think the likes of Davy Crowder, who did such a good job when he went out to man mark Sean Curry in the final, and Curry had scored 7.6 from play in the first half. Like, they have a lot of really good scores. Lorcan McMullen, Cahill and Conway can get scores. Fergal Whiteley, Dara Purcell in a couple of years, will he be sort of developing himself as maybe an option for Dublin? Ronan Hayes, of course. Alex Considine is a bruising full forward who will be looking to go straight for goal all the time. So it'll be all to do for Raharney, but like, they have Kieran Doyle, they have Killian Doyle. As I said, they have Greville. They have plenty of quality players in that team. So that'll be a good clash there. First time in 5 years that Raharney are there, and as you said, first time in 7 for Crokes. The other game then in Leinster this weekend, Clough-Ballacolla of Laois against Rapparees. And again, it feels like it was a completely different season when Rapparees won the Wexford County title, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was. I remember I was checking it up earlier. It was the first final that was televised on TG4 this year, and it was the first big one. And it was at a stage like September 19th, over 2 months ago, when most counties were still in group stage format. I think a lot of counties hadn't even reached the knockout stages, but the decision was taken in Wexford and Waterford. I suppose probably 2 examples to kind of split their club seasons because they have so many dual clubs. And I can't understand it, because if you have so many, if everyone's in the same boat and you're flipping between them, maybe there is something to it to give 8 weeks to hurling and then give your 8 weeks to football or whatever. I mean, I was chatting to Declan Root after Rapparees won the county final, and he was making that point. He said, look, it may come back to bite us in Leinster when we were kind of preparing for that. But at the moment, we feel it has worked best for us. We got 6 weeks uninterrupted, and the proof is there. First county title in 43 years. And then Starlights are their sister club. They didn't win it this year, but they won it a couple of times over the last couple of years, and would have a lot of the kind of same guys involved. He said, no, I'm passing over to the football management, and you just let them at it, and everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. The flip side then, obviously, is now you come to this situation, and like you said, looking at the photos, even like it was beautiful sunny day in Wexford Park. They scored 6-18. It's a bit of a different situation. But how cold, a cold November Saturday evening, going up to Loughmore Park, playing under floodlights. This game obviously live on RT as well, playing against the Laois champions who won, Clough, who won kind of so recently. So completely different kind of a setup. Looking into it, I mean, like Liam Ryan and Kevin Foley are kind of the main 2 guys beforehand that would have kind of stood out in the Rapparees team. But I remember one of the guys they were raving about afterwards was Alan Tobin, who was midfield. Yeah. Like, he got 1-3 from play, and how they really had targeted St. Anne's in terms of going after goals. Like looking at like Ricky Fox, corner forward, got 1-2. Lenny Conley in the other corner got 2-1. And I think Jack Kelly got 1-1. So like they really kind of went for it and have a kind of a good spread. So I suppose I think, like, again, go back to what Verney was saying. I think they played Ballygunner recently in a challenge match, but you have to think it's just so difficult. Like it's not, like you said, it's night and day. Like it's just two completely different seasons and kind of climate and settings to kind of prepare yourself for at the moment, you know.
Yeah, and like that, when I look at referees, I think Liam Ryan is a big pig of a full back, and he'd do it in all seasons for you. I think Kevin Foley can. There's certainly plenty of players there, but the size profile of the forward line of the referees make me think that it's going to be difficult for them in wintertime. Maybe they'll absolutely prove me wrong. I'm looking at the Clough-Ballacolla team here that was playing in the county championship. Like Willie Hyland, very experienced hurler. He'll be probably at the base of midfield. Robbie Phelan, he's been playing well. Stephen Bergen, Willie Dunphy, county player. Jordan Walsh probably will be. He's not on the Laois panel yet. And, of course, Picky Maher as well. So they have an awful lot of quality across the team there. I'll just run through some other fixtures that are on this weekend in the Leinster Intermediate Hurling. Naas, who won their county title recently, won the double. They're up against Castleknock, who won a penalty shootout playoff against the intermediate champions Fingallians last week. Ballygunner of Laois are up against Glenmore of Kilkenny. Oigate Glenbriner against Bray Emmets. Then the junior Leinster club, Clonakilty Fontenoy are against Tara Rocks. Clonakilty being from Dublin, Tara Rocks of Wexford. St Oliver Plunkets of Westmeath are up against Mooncoin of Kilkenny, and Maynooth of Kildare are up against Trumra of Laois. So I want to jump onto the football with you, Fintan, here. We'll talk about the Cork football final first. Clonakilty up against Finbarr. Clon haven't won it since 2009 when they beat the Bars. And the same manager is back again, Mike Hawley O'Neill.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable record. He would have been a selector under, I think it was Brian Cuppert. He came in for a while with the Cork seniors after that. Took over that Clon team in 2009. Like, Clon are an interesting side in the sense that huge tradition in the town in football. They have this kind of capacity to come from nowhere, though, with teams. You know, like in 1996, they won the county kind of against the head, wouldn't have been expected. The 2009 team, in fairness, have been coming for a good couple of years, but kind of were running into Nemo Rangers in kind of their absolute pomp when Billy Morgan was kind of in charge of them then, and lost on a couple of occasions, but finally managed to kind of get over that and got to the county final in 2009. It was actually the week after Cork had lost the All-Ireland final to Kerry, so Michael Shields is the main kind of playing survivor from that day. So he was full back in Croke Park one Sunday, lost the All-Ireland final, and then full back in Porky Creek the following Sunday, lost the county final. So fairly bad week from that front. But yeah, repeated 2009 final, but a very, very kind of different setup on both sides. Like I said, Shields would be, he's came on as a sub in the semi-final. Colin House Lyons would be the kind of main guy that's still around from the Bar side. And then from the Clon, it's just Tom Clancy, the full back, who had been kind of 17 at the time, was kind of a sub on the setup. So it's while it is repeated 12 years ago, you know, it is two very, very different setups. But in terms of O'Neill's achievement, like not only that, them reaching the semi-finals this year, that was the first time since 2009. So yeah, a bit of a surprise finalist the way the kind of draw worked out for them. But I mean, in fairness, like they beat Duhallow, who have been in a couple of finals recently, divisional team. Obviously, their preparations wouldn't be the best in terms of the amount of players that would have with club games and that. And then they beat Douglas last time, who had knocked out the reigning champions, Nemo Rangers. So that is impressive for them. The big thing about them, obviously, is the news this week that Liam O'Donovan is going to miss the game with a hamstring injury. He would have kind of come to the fore in 2019 when Cork got to the Super 8s, kind of nailed down a wing-back position, was really, really impressive. Then obviously kind of missed last year through injury. Then has had another kind of bad injury since the semi-final. And like he was really, really good in that semi-final. He kind of did a man-marking job on Sean Powder. Like Powder still got a lot of ball, but like O'Donovan was like, you know, really, really competitive around the middle. He's able to get up and down the pitch very well. And like the actual ball where he got injured, it was complete putting your body on your line for your club in a county semi-final. Basically, a kick-out broke. Clon had been up by 5. They conceded a goal and a point, so the gap is down to 1. The ball broke from the kick-out, and he basically just threw himself at it, managed to get a fist to it, to punch it to a teammate, but was then kind of left in agony afterwards and kind of limping off. And then it turned out that he had torn the hamstring. But he's a significant loss for the way they play, because we can kind of maybe talk about kind of the new players they brought in from outside the county in a minute, but it is interesting the quality of defender they have in terms of guys with Cork experience, like Liam O'Donovan, Sean White, Maurice Shanley, Tom Clancy in their defence, all have played senior for Cork over the last 5 years. Mark White, the keeper, who basically does a Rory Beggan version, has been doing a club level, like going right up to like 13, 14 yard line in the opposition And it's definitely been an interesting tactic that they've been using a lot to good advantage in the last couple of games of knockout stages. He's in goal, so there's a very, very kind of good bedrock and I suppose kind of foundation there defensively in their side.
Yeah, and just Barr's obviously won a penalty shootout against Castlehaven, which you were at. They'd beaten Clon 112-1-5 in the group stages earlier on in the championship. But I'm just looking at the Cork finals over the years. Is there a sense of I know it was 2018 when Finbarr has won it, but the fact that they'd lost 8 finals in a row, going back to the previous time that they'd won it, which was in 1985, that a bit of a monkey off their back, because that must have been weighing heavily on a club with such a storied tradition.
Yeah, it was a huge thing for them. And I mean, they dominated the 70s and 80s. They're one of the biggest sides in Cork. Not only that, like they were contesting All-Ireland finals. I mean, they won the All-Ireland Club Football in 87. They're regularly involved in Munster finals and then went 33 years, have won a hurling title since 93. So a club with a kind of lot of storied tradition. So, and even this current kind of bunch had lost the 17 final after a replay to Nemo Rangers. Like I said, a couple of them would have been involved in 09-10 when they lost. They've been involved in semi-finals, and it was this thing, like a lot of them are, playing county, various grades, winning underage titles. So you'd have to think that that's a big thing for them. But there is definitely a sense, and they've kind of touched on it this week, reading interviews with kind of manager and players, this team is kind of good enough to win more than one. And I think if they don't, given the kind of quality they have and how competitive they've been, it will be a big disappointment for them. And like they're big favourites going into Sunday. This is a huge opportunity for them, considering that they beaten Clon a couple of weeks ago by 7 points. Clon without one of kind of their best players. If it was viewed as a bit of a 50-50 game in 2018 and maybe, on previous years when they played Loughmore Rangers, maybe they might have been favourites. I think there's no doubt at this stage they are big favourites. But flip side of that, I saw Paul O'Keefe, their manager, talking this week. I hadn't quite known the odds, but he knew it well. He said they were 10-1 on favourites in 2009, which didn't realise it was that much. And they lost by a point. So he said history's enough as a kind of a warning sign to kind of guard against it. But definitely, like, go back to your question, like most of these guys involved in 2018, that was a kind of a big monkey off the back, and it's just a huge kind of release for them in terms of finally getting over the line. And
there's also a Senior A football final on in Cork, isn't there?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to confuse you, but you definitely get it eventually, I'd say, with all these grades. Like, so this is the second level. There would have been senior and intermediate up until a couple of years ago, but there was kind of a reshaping, and they cut the number of senior teams and they split the senior grade into 2. Similar to what Devon did in Dublin when Dublin was operating with 32 football teams, and they went to Senior 1 and Senior 2. But St. Michael's, who are contesting it, they have the unenviable record of getting to a load of finals but just unable to win them. So when they were operating a Premier Intermediate football grade between 2012 and 2019, they got to 5 finals and lost them all. They were the sister club of Blackrock Hurling. So guys that be familiar, some people, Ty Deasy and Daniel Meany, who will be involved with the Cork Hurlers this year, they're both in action. There's 2 players, Eric Hegarty and Owen Buckley, have played in all 5 finals, and they're playing again. So it's credit to them, in fairness, their resilience, and like they won after extra time after the semi-final to keep coming back. Like they're playing Mallow, who lost the 2020 Senior A final. So like they won't exactly lack motivation as well. So yeah, so that's on as the curtain raiser. Pretty much kind of a 50-50 game if viewed from the outside, whereas in the senior game, you definitely be thinking it's kind of more the St. Finbarr's favouritism. Just to touch on just one aspect of the senior final, which is interesting, is the guys from outside the county playing. Like Clon have gained 3 players, 2 guys from Kerry, Joe Grimes and Darragh O'Shea. Darragh O'Shea from the Guelph and Joe Grimes from the Stole, both working as guards in Clonakilty. And then a guy, Ben Ridgway, who is originally from Offaly outside Tullamore, better known as a rugby player, has been playing for like Bandon, is it Clonakilty? I think he was with Bandon originally in the Munster Junior Cup or Munster Junior League. Better known as that, but kind of involved in football now with Clon. So like Ridgway and Grimes are the 2 midfielders, and O'Shea is the main free taker up front. And then St. Finbarr's have Conor McCrickard playing for them, who's from Down, who had been on the Down panel this year. When they played Donegal in the championship, was subsequently moved to Cork and is kind of living and working there and joined the St. Finbarr. So it's just an interesting kind of flavour, I suppose. Jude's would have been, a lot of people were talking about that last week, but interesting kind of circumstances that you've kind of, maybe Kerry guys playing isn't too unusual. Tomas O'Shea a couple years ago with Nemo, but definitely I think Down and awfully interest in a Cork final is, something you don't see too regularly anyway.
You certainly don't. Just a final thing before I let you go. I know you have an egg boiling there, so you have to go off and look into it at some stage. James McCartan has been appointed the Down football boss for a second time. Now, the post had been vacant since Paddy Talley stepped aside on July the 7th. So, and most people will know that James McCartan got down to the All-Ireland final in 2010. He was over in the minors recently enough. But a manager going back, we see Declan Bonner do it, James Horan, Jack O'Connor with Kerry again. Liam Sheedy obviously went back with Tip as another example recently. What do you make of this appointment?
I think the first thing is that probably down are probably just delighted that they've actually filled it, because, you know, it's a long time since Tally stepped away. It's like so long that he himself has got involved in another county since, you know.
Isn't Longford the only team left that hasn't got a manager?
So Down and Longford were the two, having had vacancies since the middle of July. We're now approaching late November, to the extent that the pre-season competitions have been reawakened, and we're looking forward to, you know, see the FED League fixtures come out the other day. We've had a master fixture list come out, and they hadn't had managers in place.
And some teams are allowed back training in about 2.5-3 weeks, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, officially anyway, you know. I presume there's some...
and none of them are back training already.
No. That'll be the first meeting on whatever, the 8th of December, is it? But I think there's probably a bit of relief for them that they've actually got someone. In fairness, like, you can't argue with his CV, you know, with the work he did with Queens, went into Sigerson, all the club teams, then took the Down Seniors for so long. Such a storied playing career. Since then, obviously, been involved in minors. And then, obviously, the reports are that Aidan O'Rourke is coming in as head coach. And he's obviously a lot of experience, worked with Down before. You know, obviously managed Louds, played with Armagh. So on paper, it seems quite an exciting enough, I think, kind of partnership. Obviously, Jim McGuinness was the really high-profile link a couple of weeks ago that looked like it was going to go. Interesting that it's, you know, he was obviously going to be in with Marty Clark and Conor Laverty. Laverty's decided to stay with the under-20s, and obviously he's Kilcoo playing commitment. So, you know, that might be maybe kind of a clever move from his point of view in terms of kind of biding his time before he kind of, you know, it seems he's likely to get a goal maybe at the senior job at some stage. And I think Marty Clark's got him at Mayo Bridge, along with a friend of the show, is in Stephen Poacher. He's got at club level. So it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, it looked like that was the package. That now it's gone to the McCartan O'Rourke combination. So I think they'll be, you know, from the outside, I think they'll be quite happy. And you know, I suppose sometimes when someone goes back for a second time, there's a view as a bit stale or whatever. But the fact that, like, McCartan, you know, enough years have passed, the makeup of the Down team has changed. And I don't know how many years still left there from 14. I wouldn't imagine too many from when he last charged. Definitely not many. I think Kevin McCartan's the only one from the team that got to the All-Ireland final in 2010. But obviously getting involved in minors shows his fingers still on the pulse. And someone like O'Rourke, who, even for punditry thing alone, I know you've read them, like, you know, his RT columns were always very, very insightful with kind of football analysis stuff he's been doing over the last couple of years. But it is interesting, the fact that just seems to be happening a bit more often, doesn't it? Obviously, she's gone away now, but like Horn is still there, Bonner is still there, and obviously Jack has gone back for a third goal with Kerry. Yeah,
so I think in a lot of cases, because until you've managed at intercounty level, you're considered unproven. So sometimes
that's true,
it almost feels like the safer bet just to go back to the well again. But that's an interesting point. So I think that's it for our football coverage. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with Pick the Lock. So my thanks very much to Fintan O'Toole of the 42, who, by the way, has that book out with the Milers, which is a very good present that you could get for somebody for Christmas. So Miler, a family memoir. So keep an eye out for that and make sure to stuff plenty of those into the shopping cart. Thanks very much, Fintan. We're going to have a clip here of Niall Wrigley from just a couple of weeks ago when he was on with myself and Michael Verney. He was talking about I think the Laois County final in 1989 and how they had very different preparations back then. Thanks very much, Fintan.
Cheers, Shane.
Very much different times, Michael. I remember back in 1989, we were playing a county final here. It was a replay Wednesday night before the game, and we were after being trained. At that time, our tradition was maybe we'd go into our old clubhouse and we'd have a few games of pool and chill out for a while after training and chat about the game ahead or whatever. But this night we were in the clubhouse after the training session, the Wednesday night before the county final replay. Now, you wouldn't hear tell of anything like this today, you can be sure, but it was different times. But there was myself and a good friend of mine, I suppose, one of the best Laois players, I suppose, would often be spoken about well, was John Taylor. And you know, John we were there in the clubhouse just chatting away, and there was actually a party on there that night. Old Mick Mulhall, Lord of mercy, was his retirement too, and we were there. And John said to me, "Sure, it's Wednesday night. You know, we're in good shape. You know, we're will we have a pint, you know? And I said, well, sure, Jesus, I don't know, will we, John? And I sure, what harm? Sure, we'll have one or two. And sure, it mightn't be any harm, you know. Sure, one or two ended up being maybe 3 or 4, and then it was 4 and 5. And before we knew it, anyway, we were the manager of the team come over and tapped us on the shoulder, Tom Lawler, God be good to him, and just asked the question, lads, how many pints have you had? You'd mind me asking. Well, I was only young. I was only 20 at the time, so John was the elder statesman, so I blamed him immediately for having me there. But I think it went into the 2 circle figures, one on top of each other, and we quickly, out of guilt, disappeared. And I remember the next morning, no sleep, out of guilt again, up, running the next morning, swimming the next morning, a Thursday morning before the county final replay. And anyway, look, we won the replay, and both of us played pretty well, but we had to play well because I wouldn't like that to be landed on our door had we lost. You can be sure of that. But look, we won the championship anyway.
Okay, so that was Niall Rigney, great clip there. Now we have Nisha Waldron on to pick the lock. Obviously, we don't have Michael Verney this week. You're going to have his lock for this coming week as the show goes on. But let's reflect a little bit on last weekend when a certain lad said Middleton +2, and it came in. Not only did they get +2, but they won the county final.
Didn't I say I like Middleton to win the game, not cover the spread? I said I like him as a bet to win. It? No, I didn't, but sure, I locked up my lock came in.
Well,
your Montana Grizzlies. What? Well, there was no nearly about it. My lock won as well, like, so there you go. I'm 2-1. What are you again?
I'm 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And what was Bernie's bet? Did it come in?
No, he had the Senior B final. Claude Gales won it, you remember? Mr. Andrew O'Sullivan had Claude Gales picked, so he actually is after picking 2 NFL bets that came in, and then he picked Claude Gales as well that came in too. And Patrick Hickey's horse.
Commenters, just in case anyone's confused on that.
Yeah, and Patrick Hickey's horse again won. A Plutarch won, and so if anyone was following that, keeping track of that, I know I was, so my wallet is a little bit heavier this week because of Patrick Hickey. Thanks very much.
And so the viewers' bet last week was also, when I threw it out on Twitter, as we'll do with the viewers' poll again from tomorrow, Middleton +2. So the viewers, they're back on form too. Yeah,
they're 2-1 as well. So I'm at the top, neck and neck with the viewers. There you go, look.
And the Sapple Verney are 1 and 2, is it?
That's it. So again, look, thrown in. Oh, there we go, straight away. Andrew Sullivan's for Clough-Ballacolla. They are 11-10 against the Rapparees. So that's a big one. The Rapparees are actually slight favourites there, like I was saying. So that's an onion hanger, I suppose, in a way. But then again, I suppose the Raps haven't hurled since August. Is that when the Wexford County final was? September, even. Look, going to be very hard to go from the roast and hot weather in September to be hurling competitive championship action against another county champion in November. We've been down that road, obviously, famously. It's very hard, even from week to week or every 2 weeks, with the drop in temperature and stuff. Never mind going from hurling hard-nosed championship in September and August to now all of a sudden being thrown into a hardened Clough-Ballacolla. So that could be a value bet for the weekend. Another value bet, actually, I was looking at is in Ulster, in the Ulster Intermediate Hurling Championships, is Newry Shamrocks against Lisbon. Newry Shamrocks are 11-4. Now, see, the only reason I'd be kind of maybe piping that up is because you never really know what you're going to get with Lisbon. And there's been a good surge in hurling with Newry Shamrocks. Now, I know they won their first championship since 1986 or whatever, so they could be on an almighty session and maybe taking their eye off the provincial championship. But you would hope not. And 11-4 is a big price for a one-off game, I think, for the down champions to be playing against Fermanagh hurling team. I just think, right? And then the other 3 big games in the hurling, obviously, look, Raharney versus Kilmacud Crokes. The handicap there is 5 in favour of Kilmacud Crokes.
5? That's tasty enough in winter weather. I know they put up a massive scoreline in the Dublin final after extra time, but geez, that's a massive...
That's exactly what I thought. I thought 5 was probably a bit too much. And Raharney have a lot of good young players. Crokes do as well, obviously. But I suppose you would be thinking, like, can Raharney stop Ronan Hayes? Can they stop all of the Crokes forwards? So even if you shut down Ronan Hayes, who's going to shut down, Purcell, Whiteley, Considine, Oisin O'Rourke, and then you have Lorcan McMullen then as well. Like, who's going to shut all of those lads down? Do they have enough? I don't know. 5. I could see them winning by 5, kind of a thing, where the bookies, like Bernie was saying, always seem to get it bang on. So, but again, look, if you have any other picks yourself, any lock, any horse, tennis match, whatever, get the comment in there. What do you like? What do you not like?
A few are after coming in, Nisha. I'll just read them out here. So, Lifetime Ambition, Fairy House, Sunday, 5-2, says Patrick Hickey. Ballyea +5, even money. I've seen it +4 in other places. And Pure Hatchet, they won't hurl at the weekend either. Ho, up leash. So it'll be interesting. He's obviously back in Clough-Ballacolla to get the job done there. Do you know what, as well, Nisha, just to move away from GA for a second, but we will come back to it.
Yeah.
Chelsea are up against Man United on Sunday. Michael Carrick obviously got a win in his first match as interim boss against Villarreal on Wednesday night. But Chelsea, under Thomas Tuchel, have looked an absolute machine. And Tuchel obviously hit the ground running last year, taking over from Frank Lampard and won the Champions League straight away. Chelsea are 4-7, 9-2 United, a draw 14-5. What do you think there? Do you follow it enough to know?
Well, look how wrong we got last week with the soccer. Now, we said City -2 if you're brave enough. That could be fair enough. West Ham fell flat in their face, and United got absolutely battered. We were talking about United -1, and lads commenting and going, Watford are brutal. Well, if Watford are brutal, what the hell are United? So, I don't know, you would obviously, look, you'd be, surely to God, you'd be trusting Tuchel with Chelsea, their system, everything, their game plan. Everyone knows exactly what they're doing. They're very efficient. They're kind of pretty much ruthless. Whereas, United under Carrick, you just don't know. Like,
he did lots of changes, and that was a positive, and it worked out well. And then he brought on the subs, and it made a difference. But I still think it's the same core management team since Solskjaer left. So I think Chelsea -1 at 13-8 is pretty good going. Yeah,
if Ole was at the wheel or Carrick is on the saddle, is it? It's working down from a car to a bicycle, I'd say, at this stage. They're like, it's, I don't know. Again, I don't know, whatever you think yourselves. Like, I mean, what are Chelsea? -1, is it?
Chelsea -1 is 13-8.
Oh, yeah. That could be your bet. So,
it's not a bad one. I'm not saying it's the one I'm going with, but it's not bad.
Not at all. The handicap though in the Ballyea and Ballygunner game is actually -4 on what I'm seeing here, and Ballyea +4 is even. So whatever. But the other one then, I suppose, are they the team of destiny? Another big game was on TG Cahir, Loughmore against Thurles in the replay after their huge win last week in the football. Are they, like I said, the team of destiny in Tipperary? Can they finally do the double? Can they achieve it again and just straight up to win? That would be my kind of outside bet, I think, in hurling. Straight up to win against Thurles.
Yeah, I'm seeing Thurles -2 here. Evens at Loughmore +2.
Yeah. So
and I don't mind that one. I think that's a pretty decent one.
Yeah. What are you thinking? Who do you think is going to win that game?
I do think SARS should win it on the basis that Loughmore are carrying injuries. They've had a chance to sit back and be puck and ball the last couple of weeks rather than been playing Gaelic football. So I think on that basis, having a spinier defence of Paddy Maher, Ronan Maher, and having that inside forward line. But, I do think Loughmore-Castleiney should have won the drawing game. Are you on? Do you subscribe to the idea that Loughmore will go into this game bouncing because they won the football, or would they have come in more determined than ever, having lost last year's 2 finals and the football final again this year? So are they at more of a disadvantage having won?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because it was such a sickener last year to lose the 2 of them, and then they drew the first game where people would have been like, obviously Thurles were 3-point, or Saracens were a 3-point favourite, and they're kind of probably thinking, lads, we left that behind us there. I would be thinking that they would, and especially with like Mick Dempsey and them over them, Mick Dempsey's been in this position before with Kilkenny, getting to drawn and All-Ireland finals and stuff, and preparing the team for the next one. And I know they had a football match in between, which is fair enough, big games to get up for. Now we have to come down from that and get back up for the hurling. But I think with that management team, I think they should be able to do it. And I think there'll be an almighty drive there to get them over the line, I think. Again, look, team of destiny, outside bet, one to keep an eye on. I think that there's good value there. And actually, so just on Verney, right? I was on Verney there. He was texting me his lock of the week. It is in the hurling. It is in the Leinster Championship. He is locking up Clough-Ballacolla. He is locking up Clough-Ballacolla. Lock it in, baby. And so there you go against the referees, the Wexford champions. And he also was saying, yeah, to win. Clough-Ballacolla just to win. They're 11-10 just to win, you see. So the same as Andrew Sullivan texted in there as well, or messaged in. If anyone's there from the Raps, give us a shout. Why are the Raps going to win? How are they going to win? Message in. But he said as well to flag up to make sure we draw and highlight, right? Thomas's are 8-15 next week, and he thinks that's huge value to keep an eye on that. And then
obviously the odds are too tight there for that to ever qualify for a lock.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then, right, my lock of the week is related to something that Verney was telling me to highlight as well. It's this weekend, the Munster Championship, Ballyea versus Ballygunner, former club of mine, of course. I am locking up the red and black, Dara Sullivan's red and black army from the Dunmore Road, Ballygunner -4 against Ballyea. Lock it in, baby. That's my lock of the week.
I see it. The lock is up on the screen the whole lot, but it's winter hurling. Ballyea always dive with their boots on. They've got a lot of very physical, strong players there. I know Desi Hutchinson could go to town. I know there's all those quality players in the Ballygunner side, but I'd be more thinking the other way. Now, Patrick Hickey is saying, what bookies are you looking at? We're not going to name drop any bookies for nothing here, but we've both looked it up there and we've both seen +4. Let's see, Andrew Sullivan, Verney will put the blight on me this week.
Yeah, you're paired up with Verney, Matt.
I'm thinking I like Loughmore +2 at evens, but I have to say I'm more inclined to think Chelsea -1, even though that's 13-8. So I'm picking something with much bigger odds there. But you know, I'm going to put my neck on the block and say Chelsea -1. Lock it up. That's my lock of the week.
There you go. Boom. Onion hanger.
Or, so
as you can see behind me there, a nutcracker.
So for the viewers out there, get your comments in and let us know what you think should be the lock of the week. We're going to then throw them on a poll on at OurGame HQ. We'll do a bit of a vote there, and then next week, hopefully the viewers will improve their 2-1 record, along with Nisha, who's on 2-1, myself and Verney both on 1 and 2. We're going to keep it going up till Christmas and see who's the smartest when it comes to pick the lock.
Verney was saying there as well, keep an eye on it there. Ballygunner for a long-term bet, 15-8 to win Munster. That was his tip. Now, I think Ballygunner are on a bit of a mission. They have a lovely mixture of the older lads who have been there, done it, and then the younger lads coming up through, like Harry Ruddle, Desi, Kevin Manny, Mikey Manny, these types of lads mixing in real nicely with the older fellas, you know, Philip Porrick, Saki, Barry Coughlin, all these kind of lads, right? I think they're ready and primed. They should be pushing on now to be competing for an All-Ireland now. Anyway, look, we'll see this weekend. Anyway, on to the NFL. It's a huge week in the NFL.
Sorry, just before you do, because there's one more comment in here. Sorry to cut across you. But Pure Hatchet says, lock of the week has to be the Bars. So saying Finbarr, as we were previewing with Fintan O'Toole earlier, they're up against Clonakilty this weekend. He says, probably go -5. Well, the odds online are saying Finbarr's -3 at evens. So we'll give it a -3. I think that's pretty good because Liam O'Donovan is going to be missing for Clonakilty, and they haven't been in the final for quite some time. So go ahead there with the NFL.
So, yeah, and we'll throw them up as well on the poll, so you can vote for them on Twitter then, obviously, right? But the NFL, right, there's just a couple of games, there's stay-away games, and then obviously, look, today is Thursday when we're recording this, so if you missed the Thursday recording, you're probably going to miss out on any tips on the Thanksgiving games. So I'll put them up on my Twitter, right? I'll talk about them because there's value this weekend. But this weekend's, right? I have a load of stay-away games because there's a load of really good games, like the Steelers versus Bengals. That'll be a class game. Buccaneers versus Colts be a class game, but I'm staying out of them. What I am going for, what I am looking at, is the Eagles -3.5 against the New York Giants, right? I really like that. The Patriots now, since I picked this, the line has moved. The Patriots are now -6.5 against the Titans. The Titans are just broken to bits. Post-Thanksgiving is when the season starts for Bill Belichick. They're looking to go top of the division with a win against a busted up and battered Titans team. So they're -6.5
against Texas. Houston
they don't. They've no Derrick Henry, no AJ Green, Julio Jones. Sorry, isn't it the receiver? Yeah, sorry, I'm all over the place here. And then I also like the Baltimore Ravens -3.5. Right, as a treble, right, that is a pretty big, decent sized bet. If you wanted to treble them all up together, it is nearly 6-1. It's 5.86 to 1. But then, right, there's huge value to be made here in the Rams at the Packers game, right? Because I cannot pick the winner here, right? So if you do 2 separate bets, this is what I was looking at doing, right? Put a tenner on each of them, do that treble, right? Then put on one slip, you have the Rams to win, and then on the other slip, you have the Packers to win. So you have a 4-fold accumulator. It's over 12 to 1, right? I think, and that's all Sunday. So I think there's huge value to be made there. It'll be over 12 to 1. So if you put a tenner on each of them, that's it.
So lose twice.
Well, or that could happen, right? But straight up, just picking either the Rams to win or the Packers to win, 2 separate slips, along with them things to cover, those 3 teams to cover, which I think, Ravens, Patriots, and the Philadelphia Eagles should all be looking to cover in them games, I think. And then it's just that the Steelers now are starting to get people back. They're playing against the Bengals, which is a huge divisional game, kind of a big brother, little brother thing, who they think going to beat them Bengals and all that. Well, the Steelers usually do. Terrible towels wave and all that good stuff. JJ Watt, I think, or TJ Watt, sorry, is back, I think. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think, is back. Mike Tomlin doesn't have a losing record ever in his career as a coach. I don't think he wants to start this season. Lads, will you go away betting on the NFL? Hey. If you were keeping up to date, I don't know if you saw my Twitter last week, we got every single one right except the Packers one. So the Vikings as well is another one, which will be a savage game. Vikings are playing the 49ers. That'll be a class game. But the Vikings to bet on, they're like, you'd be having a heart attack watching them, because they have almost every game they've played in, won or lost. They're 1-score games. So again, look, maybe do that too. Go on.
Is it fair to say that is it week 11 in the NFL out of 17?
Well, week 12 now.
And nobody has a clue who's going to win the Super Bowl.
No. From week to week, it's insane. So there's there's only something like 2 teams or 3 teams in each conference that are outside of making the playoffs. Like that, there's all these teams that have terrible records, but they're only like a game or 2 wins out of like the Dolphins are back in it now. All of a sudden, have a really good chance of making the playoffs, and they were absolutely brutal. The Bills, who everyone was saying were the best team in the AFC, now are falling down the pecking order. Even though I think in the Thanksgiving game, I think they'll cover. So look, the NFL from week to week, the parity, as they say, it's and apparently now as well, right? Home field advantage has completely disappeared. It used to be like 62% of teams at home won every week and every season, or whatever, and that's dropped way down now. I think they're about 51 or under 51%. So look, there is value to be made there. Like I said, that 3 with the extra one with the Rams and Packers split over 12 to 1. What harm, lad? Would be nice stuff. And Patrick Hickey's horse as well. That's one I'm definitely keeping an eye out for as well. After last week, I'll be lighting my cigars with brown, lads.
Pure Hatchet says, I'm a Jets fan. Pains me to say it, but back anybody they're playing. This week they're up against the Texans, who beat the Titans last weekend. So maybe they'll get a third win of the season. That's
another stay away game. And actually, the toilet bowl, as they call it. But yeah, I think if there's nothing else, I think that's pretty much all I have. I just wanted to get my lock in. My boys from the Dunmore Road.
So just to clarify then, right? I'm going with Chelsea -1 against United. We see some of the other ones that are put up by the viewers so far. We've got the Bears -3 against Clonakilty, Lifetime Ambition at Fairy House, Ballyea +4, +5. Well, I think I've seen +4 in more places than more often than not. So we're going to go with +4 on that. Patrick Hickey's not going to be happy because he was commenting there, but we're going to go on +4 on that. What has Verney picked again?
Clough-Ballacolla to beat the referees.
Okay.
Just to beat them.
And then we're going to put the poll up on @OurGame HQ on Twitter and get your voting in. We'll put that up tomorrow, and I think up till about maybe midday on Saturday, that'll be available. So vote away there and keep the viewers back on top.
And again, the viewers, you're the ones, you have to go with what wins the poll. All right, so you're going with that. That is your choice. You're 2-1 at this stage, so fair play to you. If you're getting your individual ones, deadly. I'm 2-1 as well, sitting pretty at the top. So hopefully I go to 3-1 with Ballygunner, Ballyea Gunner, the Gunners.
And Connor
Pussy Rovers 74 versus Castleiney.
Yeah, Pussy Rovers, yeah. You never know. Keep an eye on it. Keep the comments coming in, and we'll go with whatever the majority thinks. Right, that's it. Thanks very much for joining us, Nisha. That's been the show today. Get the comments in. Please do subscribe to us on all the different social platforms. On YouTube there, the bottom right-hand corner underneath Nisha. Also, if you want to subscribe on Patreon and support the channel, please do. It's $5 a month, and you can get your audio podcast there. It's the only place to do that. And don't forget that Torpy, the bamboo stick, it's sold out just at the moment. They'll be back in next week. Go to torpy.ie just to keep an eye on there. Nisha, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sound lad, short and sweet, just like myself. Good luck.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.